Why I should not throw snowballs on the playground. Sister Mary Christopher, our principal at Our Lady of Perpetual Motion grade school, was a 6'2" basketball 3-point shooter before the Lord drafted her as a star player for the Sisters of Sorrowful Mother. As principal, it was Sister Christopher's duty to investigate, adjudicate, and punish all playground crimes. For most offenders, she'd cherry-pick sentences like loss of recess, scrubbing messy blackboards, clapping dusty erasers, or if a kid had sloppy penmanship, she'd make them disavow their crime by writing, "I will not do," insert playground crime here, 100 times in well-formed cursive. But for repeat offenders like my brother John, Sister Christopher dispensed her most extreme penalty, the 500-word essay. With the 500-word essay, Sister Christopher hoped to inspire John's repentant reflection on the transgression under consideration, while at the same time stimulating his gift of creative writing. While John's level of repentance was always questionable, his creative writing did flourish under the umbrella of Sister's 500-word punishments. When my brother was caught throwing snowballs on the playground in grade 5, Sister Christopher handed him an empty blue book. In her bold cursive, she wrote the assigned theme of the punishment on the cover. Why I should not throw snowballs on the playground. Sister Christopher loved John. Perhaps it was because Sister Christopher also taught middle school English with my brother as one of her students. And like most citizens of Our Lady of Perpetual Motion, Sister fell under the spell of what today we call graphic stories. Every story John ever wrote emerged in comic strip format. John learned his cartoon strip writing craft by spending his entire weekly allowance purchasing and devouring comic books, Mad Magazine, and Bazooka bubblegum. Bazooka gum for its colorful cartoon strip wrappers and magic deals. John's plots were reliably filled with Star Wars-inspired invading aliens and middle school superheroes. The characters appeared in cartoon format, complete with expressive dialogue bubbles suspended above their heads and a narrator's comment below the cartoon frame. For a mere 5 cents, Bazooka Gum offered John amazing deals on magic rings, hypnotic spinners, cursed ancient coins, and simple how to turn stuff invisible spells. John wove these products into nearly every scene of his cartoon stories. Now, perhaps Sister fell for John's rapier sharp Geiger counter detection of BS. Like when he outed racism on Saturday morning TV with a cartoon strip easily pinpointing the fact that the Lone Ranger was not alone. and highlighting the myriad ways that this ranger would be a lost ranger if it were not for the map reading skills and gut instincts of Tonto, his loyal sidekick. Now, some 20 years later, with the spotlight raised on LGBTQ rights, John confided in me with raised eyebrows that the show's byline, faithful companions, even though they were fictional characters, my brother was sure that Tonto and the ranger had the vibe of a couple. Anyway, Sister Christopher loved the Tonto essay and tacked it up on the top of her language arts bulletin board, where it remained for over a year. Now, perhaps Sister Christopher's soft spot for my brother also had something to do with the fact that John was the star pitcher on Sister's inter-parish baseball team. Or maybe it was the fact that he was the only kid in school who could occasionally beat her in a playground game of horse. But most of all, I believe, it was his essays that cracked her up and stole her heart. Now, you need to know one final thing about my brother's essays. Instead of the pedestrian closer, "the end," John used a unique sign-off phrase constructed from his favorite Latin adverbs and fueled by the bad boy, potty mouth humor still trending in grade schools today. He formed his closer phrase from 3 Latin adverbs. Ooh. Ubi, meaning where, sub, meaning under, and semper, meaning always. And when strung together, these Latin adverbs formed John's mantra, the mantra he used to close his stories. Semper ubi, sub ubi, which, when translated, means always wear underwear. He used this closing in all of his graphic cartoon stories and often when ending conversations with adults, like during a neighborhood party. To end a chat with an adult, he'd fold his hands reverently in Anjali Mudra. He would bow his head and he'd whisper, "Semper ubi, sub ubi." Now, this delighted adults in the know, while adults with no understanding of Latin potty humor often mistakenly pegged John as reverent, and perhaps even a kid well on his way to the priesthood. Now, what did Sister Christopher do whenever John semper ubi sub ubi'd her? She'd crack up. For Sister Christopher, using Latin adverbs was never a crime. Now, John pitched softballs in playground games of catch, and that worked well in the fall and in the spring. But during the winter, John preferred, when possible, to hurl snowballs. One November, an early Wisconsin blizzard blanketed our playground with 10 inches of perfect packing snow. John promptly organized the middle school boys into teams, building protective forts, and the boys packed the forts with piles of snowballs, which they let fly in a ferocious snowball war. One not-so-gifted snowballer nearly brained a nun on playground duty, and John, identified as the ringleader, was sent to Sister Christopher for sentencing. When he got to the office, Sister rolled her brown eyes, and John blinked his baby blues, attempting to appear contrite, as well as to appeal to their mutual sense of attraction and admiration. Unmoved, Sister handed John a blue book in which he was to write a 500-word essay. The prompt, why I should not throw snowballs on the playground. Resigned to his punishment, my brother set to work retitling the assignment. Don't whack a nun in the head with a snowball. The following week, on a chilly Thursday, 1 week before Thanksgiving, my mother Bernadette, president of the Christian Mothers Society, finished assembling food baskets for the needy. And then she stopped in the chapel to light a vigil candle. And there she spotted Sister Christopher going into what appeared to be a full-body seizure. It was Sister Christopher's habit to park herself at the side altar devoted to the Blessed Virgin Mary and peacefully correct papers. There, Sister found the solitude and the wisdom to move her red pen under the grace and guidance of our Holy Mother Mary. And it was in this very spot that the apparent medical emergency happened. To Bernadette's ever-vigilant eyes, Sister Christopher was undergoing either an epileptic seizure or a massive heart attack. Well trained in CPR, Bernadette rushed to Sister's side, finding Sister trembling, shivering, hiccuping, and gasping for breath. EMT prepared, Bernadette attempted mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, but was thwarted by Sister Christopher's enormous palm signaling stop. As my mother would tell me later, she took a moment to reassess Sister's condition, only to find that Sister was, in fact, not dying, but seized by fits of uncontrollable laughter. Sister Christopher was so consumed by giggles that she couldn't speak. Every few seconds, she dipped back into convulsive, rib-clutching hilarity. Tears rolled down her cheeks as Sister attempted to dam that flood with a handkerchief. With a trembling hand, she passed John's essay to my mother. Heavy with child, Bernadette settled herself in the pew next to Sister Christopher and read the essay. Now, John began the essay with a disclaimer that one could never really guarantee where snowballs would go during a snowball fight, since it was a case of every man for himself, with lots of ducking and weaving and bobbing. Then he launched into graphic cartoon segments demonstrating the consequences of reckless snowball throwing, especially when a nun was on the playground. Don't whack a nun in the head with a snowball was less a contrite cautionary tale and slightly more of a how-to manual. However, the essay did offer the reader a shocking graphic tour of all the damage a snowball could do to a nun, especially if the kid pitching the snowball had good aim. Each cautionary segment of the essay was accompanied by 2 or 3 black and white cartoon frames, accented periodically with red to illustrate blood flow. Each frame included dialogue bubbles, and under the frame, a narrative storyline. In the first frame, a nun stands on the playground between 2 mounds of snow piles, resembling snow forts. In this picture, a dotted line, like a string of ants, makes the snowball's trajectory, the route it travels on its way to being the nun. In the second frame, the snowball smacks the nun with the word splat, surrounded by flying fragments of snow. A bubble above the nun's head reads, "Oh no, a flying snowball." In the third frame, the snowball has dislodged the nun's veil and wimple. She stands in the frame bemoaning her stringy, wet hair. Her dialogue bubble reads, "Oh no, the kids can see my hair." The narrative comment below the frame informs the reader, "Now we kids know for sure, nuns do have hair." In the next segment, the first frame remains the same, a nun standing between 2 snow forts, with the same dotted line signaling the traveling snowball. In the second frame, splat, the snowball hits, and in the third frame, small birds circle the nun's head, her eyeballs rolled inward. The bird's dialogue reads, "Cuckoo, cuckoo." The narrative frame below reads, "If you hit a nun in the temple, she could go temporarily cuckoo, cuckoo." The third segment began the same way. Nun standing between the forts, snowball sailing toward her, splat. Then, in the third frame, she stands, mouth open, with a black space where her front teeth once were. Drops of red blood dripping from her mouth onto the playground. On the ground were 2 white, chiclet-looking teeth. Her dialogue bubble reads, "Oh no, that snowball knocked out my 2 front teeth." The narrative statement under the frame reassures the reader, "Don't worry, sister, my father's a dentist." Our father was a dentist. In the next section, the eyeball rolls across the playground swimming in a river of blood. It's all you need. In the final segment, there's only 1 frame. In this frame, a nun lays face down in a mound of snow, arms and legs stretched out as if making snow angels. This frame contains the darkest warning of all. It cautions the reader, and if you are a really good pitcher, you could, with deadly aim, actually kill a sister. And that would be a terrible mortal sin, especially if the sister is a nun that you really, really, really like. Of course, John closed the essay with his signature, semper ubi sub ubi. And in tiny writing above the last ubi, in faint pencil, he added the number 500. My mother finished reading "Don't Whack a Nun in the Head with a Snowball," and her eyes were red from tears of laughter. She looked over at Sister Christopher, who continued to struggle with volcanic spurts of the giggles. "Sister, what does this mean?" my mother asked, her forefinger tapping John's Latin phrase. Sister reached out and squeezed my mother's arm. Still unable to speak, Sister lifted her red pen and wrote the answer on the cover. "Always wear underwear." Bernadette took a beat, shook her head, sighed, and surrendered to the powerlessness of parenting a kid like my brother. Sister smiled a knowing smile and handed my mother the essay. My mother crossed herself, stood, and made her way to the main altar, where she ignited 3 rows of vigil candles and dropped $3 into the donation cup. Clutching the essay, she left the chapel. Sister Christopher, still dabbing her eyes, returned to grading papers. Now this evening, in tribute to my darling brother John, also known to many of you as Breadhead, I will close this as John would have wanted me to close, with hands folded in Anjali Mudra, head bowed. I chant, semper ubi, sub ubi, or thank you.